Hello everyone, how you doing? And welcome back to Skye and Evan in the morning. And today we're going to be talking about 1929 movie called Pandora's Box, starring Louise Brooks.
Mhm.
What did you think of it,
Super
Evan?
old-fashioned one.
Yeah,
Uh, I I I liked it a lot, honestly. I I was far more entertained than Nosferatu, and, like, this is the thing, like, Nosferatu, watching that kind of, like, sparked a new interest in silent movies. I wanna, like I don't think I've watched any Buster Keaton movies. There's a lot of, like, old-fashioned filmmakers that I wanna check out, but it it doesn't feel like a movie from this era. It really feels like a newer
yeah,
movie. And straight up, like, the vibe of the movie is almost noir. Like, just straight
yeah.
like, kind of like a detective and, like, femme fatale, like, is
It
it
feels
does not feel like a
tailor-made
product of its
for
time.
the 80s or the 90s. I was just saying that before we started recording, but like this kind of feels like a movie you'd see like starring like Nicole Kidman or something in the 90s, you know? Like it just has that vibe, especially because the movie is so like cynical, I guess, that it feels to fit with that vibe perfectly. Whereas with like the 1920s, it kind of feels like a I don't know a simpler time where stuff wouldn't be this cynical. That's just the vibe I got from it anyway. But it feels like a modern movie made in 1929, and it kind of is uh the biggest flaw in the movie is that it was made in 1929, so it was a silent movie because the dialogue could have been great for the type of movie that it was, which is why I found the
I'm
movie a little frustrating. But
Well, what I found hilarious is, like, I was paying a lot more attention to, like, when the characters articulated, like, they were clearly talking, like, but, just no audio could be recorded, but I was like, I felt like I was filling in the blanks just a little bit because it's like I in any other movie, they would be, like, doing dialogue through and through, and like I said, they're those individual lines in silent movies have, like, more punch to them, but I was just like, "Man, would have been nice if we had dialogue throughout," but
yeah,
I get it.
yeah, it's the type of movie. It's wild. I didn't know anything about this movie when I went in to watch it, so I was just like, I was an hour in. I was like, wait, where is this movie going? And then there's the trial scene, and I get the that's Pandora's box. She's like ruining men's lives. Ooh. And it is kind of interesting how like especially for its time, her influence, it actually doesn't just exist over men but women too. They're all like enchanted with her, which I found that fascinating. I was like, yeah, that's a really cool idea, which is why again it doesn't feel like a movie that old. It feels modern. And just to mention it as well, Louise Brooks is fantastic in this movie, genuinely
Oh,
one of the
yeah.
best performances I've seen. She's phenomenal. Like just her smile winning over men, like it feels believable just because she's so
And
like so charming. It's fascinating. She's really good.
and she's always, like, posing as well, like, I swear the costumes are, like, part of the reason why, like, she's so captivating, but, like, she always, like, moves around or positions herself in ways that, like, seem seductive or
Yeah.
just, like, her looks and especially the eyes and, like, the expressiveness of the eyes is one of, like throughout, like, all the characters kind of have expressive eyes in this movie, but it's it's amazing what she does.
Yeah.
One of the things I wanted to address, I don't know, if you got the same thing, but on my Criterion Blu-ray, that it explained, the process of, this. Basically, there's no original negative that's still out there apparently, and they pieced the one that's on Criterion together from apparently 3 cuts and I think a different, audio track. But it's
Hmm.
apparently, like, essentially film museum stuff that's, like, stuff that, like, was just barely preserved, and they stitched the 3 of them together and tried their best with, like, digital tools to match the grade. There were only a few times where I could tell where something, like, maybe looked a little bit more damaged or different, but
There was one time
by
where I
and
noticed that. Yeah.
I
Most of it was
think
pretty good.
you and I are probably thinking of the same thing. I It's, like, one shot in particular, it's, like, a little I think it's on the boat. I could be wrong.
I remember just something that like some fog in the air just before. I think it was just when we met the killer in Act 8. Uh, there's a
Ah,
shot that looks really damaged.
hmm.
But
um,
well,
go on.
go. I no, you go.
A trick that I loved that was like honestly caught me a little bit off guard when I saw it. It's a simple thing, but it wouldn't be a surprise in any other movie, but in this movie it is a surprise. It's I believe it's Alwa at the piano. Uh the music stops. Like there's a character that's playing the piano, and then the music that is playing in the background, because there's music through and through for ambience, it stops, and then the character starts playing the piano, and then the soundtrack transitions into non-diegetic music. So it's funny because like that type of thing happens in movies like tricks where like there's diegetic music, and then like someone takes off like the record and the music stops. It's
Mhm.
just it's funny to see that in a movie this old where you're like that's just a neat little trick that's like just common movie magic basically.
Yeah, yeah, that was interesting. It there was actually like twice that happened, and I was like really impressed. It is. I don't
Yeah,
know if
the
it's like
this
I'm just easily impressed because the movie's so old, but I'm just like, man, that's cool, you
well,
know?
well, yeah, like again, it seems like it seems reductive, or at least like, oh come on, you're praising that, but I'm just like, dude, it back in this era again, 1929, it's like almost 100 years old. So yeah, the second time I believe was in the wedding. I think like
Mm-hmm.
the dance is about to start, and then the band
The
starts
band, yeah,
playing, and
exactly.
yeah, it's it's great.
Yeah. It in terms of the story though, what what did you think of it? You told me you didn't like the second part as much as the first half of the movie, and I think I kind
Yeah,
of agree.
it's interesting because like the first part of it, like, I almost got like a Hitchcock vibe, especially with like hiding the guy in the apartment. But like the whole movie is about her and the doctor, and basically like she entices him in, like, because he's trying to get married, and he thinks it's going to destroy his reputation, and then she like entices him back in, and then like essentially forces him to marry her, quote unquote. And then from there the wedding goes like crazy awry, and it ends with full out like a gun being pulled and him
Yeah.
trying to like kill her, like to suicide her. And it's like it was just like again, like it almost feels Hitchcock. It's such like a thriller noir. And then after that, what follows, I just don't find it as interesting. It's kind of like a just trial and then running away, and it it hit peak around there in like
Yeah.
Act 4, in my
Yeah,
opinion,
I
and then
kind of
after that,
think
it
like
didn't quite
the
get up.
movie kind of didn't know where to take the story, which is why I said it. I think it'd be better as a short film if it was just like that first part and then her killing him, and then maybe you have the trial, and then like you can end there. But like after that, it was just kind of like I don't know what the story was trying to do, like
Well,
after that.
well, that's the funny thing is like if I were writing it, or like again, I think I've seen stories like this. I think we all have, again, with the noir deal. It's just that like that's about an hour in, and then there's like still an hour and a half, and like the time on the gambling boat is one of the things that I like found kind of like, I'm not saying you could have cut that part out, but again, with just the intrigue, like I even found the ending, like once they go to London, better than that middle section. And it's a weird way to structure a story, like especially like a 2-hour runtime. It's like this has like the length of like a modern movie, but it's
Yeah.
it's kind of structured oddly.
Yeah, I just thinking while I was watching, like, because it's very common for me to think about movies nowadays, just being like, man, this movie's too long, but it's a 1929 movie that I think is too long, so it's interesting. But it did. I feel like if it was like 90 minutes, it could have probably been a lot better paced, especially with the entire, as you said, the gambling in the boat part, like all that. I felt it's just like where are we going? Like, I get that the point is just like the fallout of her escaping, but like it could have done something more interesting, and it was just like I did like the end of that entire part, which was just like the entire thing unraveling and her using people, like pitting them against each other. It was just like, yeah, that's kind of cool, kind of like playing chess with humans. That was kind of cool, but like the most of the sequence I found kind of frustrating, and especially like the guy is just like, oh yeah, I'm gonna sell you to this guy that's going to Cairo, like,
Yeah, and then getting like the fake deck of cards. I mean, like
yeah,
seriously, like you were saying, everyone's playing chess with each other, so like it's kind of entertaining to watch. It's just that like it's undercut by them just kind of escaping, and
yeah.
then I mean, you know, they just lose money basically. That's kind of the effect of the
Well,
scene.
yeah,
So
this movie kind of feels like they had some ideas for cool scenes, but they didn't know how to like put it together because like they just escape, like you said. If it was a little bit
yeah,
more
it
interesting, that like that entire scene would have
well,
like a bigger impact.
well, and this is another thing to like consider is it's all broken up into distinct acts.
Hmm.
Like I found that funny. Like I think the first act is like maybe 15 minutes or so. Let me
Yeah, I think most
Yeah,
acts
it's
are
about
around 10 to 15 minutes.
yeah, the first act's about 20, but it's like the movie's like broken up essentially into segments, and each of those is basically like a different story.
Hmm.
Like the opening like introduces the characters, you have the wedding segment, you have that like dance sequence, like each one is almost like its own individual story. It's but like, you know, they are supposed to tell like one complete story like any other movie, and it's just that second bit.
Yeah, I don't know.
Uh,
I find the general like idea of the story interesting, and it's why it's like I don't usually like saying this because a lot of the time modern remakes they kind of frustrate me, but I feel like this movie is like primed for a remake. Like,
that would be really interesting.
because
Like
like I
it's
think the story feels so modern, and you can make a really cool story with the same premise, without all the like 1920s isms, I guess.
I'd want a good direct. I just you can't fully modernize that. I'd be worried about like how it was shot. Like I'm just like go simple. Honestly, like you could even do it black and white. I
I mean,
wonder
yeah.
what it would look like if you tried to be like super what if like someone like Robert Eggers directed it? Like I wonder
I don't know if
like
it's his
how
vibe,
old
considering how
fashioned.
he's like super horror.
Yeah, I mean, I probably said that just because the lighthouse jumped into
Yeah,
mind, but like
because I'm thinking
it,
more of like Scorsese type of directors, you know, like this movie just
yeah.
screams 80s to me, so I'm just thinking, yeah, 80s directors, like Scorsese type or
Well, and
uh
Scorsese's like a very exciting director, and his movies are very fast
yeah.
paced. And this movie, like, it's kind of his vibe. So
Yeah. I mean, I doubt he would, but it feels like a
no,
movie that could be really cool if you did it. So, yeah.
this is another thing I wanted to acknowledge. We already talked about the whole diegetic and non-diegetic music, but another thing that caught me a little bit off guard. By and large, the camera is like completely stationary in this movie. Like it's clear, like tripod setup or like whatever the hell rig they had. And then you have just a couple of scenes where they pan. There's one shot where characters are going down the stairs, and it's a super common thing in movies nowadays. It's like
Yeah,
the
I was
going through
thinking
the
about
set,
that
going through the
shot.
floor, and it's
Yeah.
like oh, but like again, with just the technology they were dealing with, I legitimately don't know how they did that. I don't know if they had like some sort of like scissor lift that like kind of lowered them to the ground. I mean, they wouldn't have had to worry about it being loud, but something had to lower the whole camera down for that shot. And it's like back in that day, that was ingenuitive. And I'm wondering what that
Yeah.
would
I
have
was
been
looking
and how
at that
big
shot. I
the
was just thinking, like, nowadays this is so common, but at the time, people watching that in theaters must have been like blown away. Like, oh my god, how did they do that?
Well, I'm wondering as well, like how big, like and heavy the camera was, because nowadays you could like technically fishing wire your iPhone down to get that shot, but like the cameras were way bigger and harder to operate. And I think they might have even had to have been hand cranked. Again, I don't want to be. I have no clue what it was like, but holy, one way or another, it they have rigs like designed for these kinds of shots. It's like basically it's like a dolly pan down, but like it back in this day, they didn't have any of that technology. So however they did that, it's impressive and it's so cool to see in a movie this old.
Yeah, it looked really cool. I I really love that. Genuinely, like, pretty impressive movie for its time. Like, because
Yeah,
we were talking about Nosferatu. We're gonna compare it to Nosferatu all the time. You have because these are the two like 1920s movies that we've watched recently. But like that movie is super simplistic. This actually feels like a proper movie, which it may sound like an insult
yeah.
to Nosferatu,
Well,
but you get it. Like this feels like everything was like made in a purposeful way, like the way it's shot, the as you said, the wardrobe, how important that is to crafting Lulu's character. So like it just feels like a really really well made movie, like in all the senses of how what filmmaking is, instead of just being like, oh, it's a fun horror movie that inspired a lot of stuff, but isn't actually all that inventive, I guess.
yeah, there's more meat on the bones of this story for sure. Um, the a vibe that I was getting as well, like it was reminding me of Babylon. I That's
It
another
did
that would
remind me
actually be
of
an interesting
Babylon
thing to talk
too, but I
about.
know you don't like that movie. I love that movie, so.
I need to rewatch it. I don't like having strong opinions on movies if I haven't like seen it at least twice, but yeah, that would be an interesting one to discuss. But yeah, the whole scene where with all the different costumes and different dancers on stage, like I was like that is so similar to that movie. And
Hmm.
I don't know how big of a budget. That was another thing I was thinking of, like all the actors moving around in that scene. Like there must have been like 50 people all doing like
Yeah.
acting like they're, staging sets together and getting their costumes all in place. I'm like, man,
Yeah, I mean they
this
did
is
some like Charlie Chaplin stuff basically as well, when they lift the director up by accident and
yeah,
everything. I was like, that's super Charlie Chaplin, and like with all these actors in the shot, that must have been really really hard to do.
yeah, entertaining stuff to say the least.
So, man, Alva looks so much like Oscar Isaac. It was actually fascinating.
Tiny, yeah, tiniest detail. Like you pointed that out when I hadn't finished the movie fully, and my God, I could not unsee it. Like
Every time I was looking, there was
the,
I think it was in the boat when he was gambling. I looked at him, I was like, man, that's Oscar Isaac. Even the fucking,
I,
messy hair. It was exactly like Oscar Isaac.
I think the biggest thing is his eyes. Like
Yeah.
there's just something about his eyes that like is squinting, especially from a distance. Like, yeah, he absolutely look. There's a couple of shots that I almost want to put it up side by side because they look that similar in parts where I'm like, man, you could almost sell it. Like, those videos where it's like, is this like this celebrity back in time? And you're like, what the? It's like, man, it's pretty insane.
But
Segue.
sorry.
Go on.
No, I was just gonna say, because obviously I mentioned it as a joke, but like in terms of the actors, other than Louise Brooks, what did you think of the acting in general? Because like
Well, that
Louise
was where I
Brooks
was
is
gonna go,
amazing.
actually.
Oh, that's
Uh,
fair.
she she's good. I definitely like the show stealer of this movie,
Yeah.
but I like the acting all around, and this I keep saying Nosferatu over and over and over. Rega regardless, we mentioned this in the Nosferatu episode, but, the whole restriction of having, like, specific dialogue punches with, like, the black screen, it means that, like, most of the acting in this movie has to be done through body language,
Yeah.
and something I love in this movie is different characters almost have different, like, signatures to their body language. Like, in the opening, you're like she's meeting this drunk, like, brooding person, and he's got this, like, very loose way of holding himself, and then as soon as the doctor enters, like, he's very stone, he moves around, like, his arms don't move all that much, like, a lot more of a brooding performance, and it's like
Yeah,
every
he's yeah. I actually thought his actor was really good, because like it was the entire movie, like
yeah.
that entire performance, and then he just kind of loses it when he grabs the gun, and you're like, holy shit! And then you see him actually
Well,
be angry. Like I thought his performance was actually pretty nuanced.
Yeah, that shot. Well, I swear, that shot where he like looks down the barrel and was like, "Damn, they could get away with this." And then,
Yeah.
yeah, it full out to the western shot with like the pistol entering the frame. Like, it's hard to like overstate how modern this film feels at parts. Like this shot right here of like Alva in her lap and then the gun coming into frame. It's like, dude, it gets intense, and like the actor is the one who sells it. Like he did an amazing job of like being at notch 10.
Yeah. I mean, oftentimes you get like from silent movies performances that are very like exaggerated because you kind of need to,
Yeah.
tell
Every
the story without dialogue, so you need to be
well,
clear.
Chaplin movies are consistently like that. You get
Well, yeah,
very
but they're more
expressive,
comedic,
like
to be fair.
fast.
They're more
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
comedic. Like just in general, like even Nosferatu, there were a lot of moments where it's just like, like
Well, this is why like I'd need to see more silent movies to get a gauge on like just how abnormal this feels for them. But I've seen a decent bit of silent movies, and they do have like even the music in this movie is in line with what silent movies were like back in the day that I've seen. But I got like a more exuberant vibe from silent movies just en masse. And this movie, like its genre, is part of the reason why it doesn't fit into that model. But it's hilarious, like how different it is to the tone of those types of movies.
well, because the thing
I,
is, because like we started this conversation kind of criticizing the movie, especially like the second half. But I kind of feel the same way about this movie as I do about like Joker 2, where it's like there's so much good stuff in it that I find it hard to like be too harsh on it, but I also see how it could have been like a lot better. Like it is
yeah,
a really interesting movie. Like it is a worth I think it's a worthwhile experience to watch this movie, even if you're not like super into film history. I just think it's a really interesting movie on its own, and like because what you were talking about, like it doesn't it doesn't really feel like a silent movie in so many ways, and everything about the tone, it just feels so purposely made and so like done so well, because like the entire movie is this kind of like cynical experience of like this woman ruining many people's lives through her being so charming. Like it just like the entire tone of the movie and the soundtrack and everything, like the performances especially, they all sell that, like the different ways like these people get enchanted by her, and it's all like every character has a different reason to be in love with her basically, and they're all like really well portrayed by the actors, so it's really fascinating.
yeah. It's it's a film that almost feels like out of time. It
Yeah.
feels out of place, and it's impressive to watch. Like there's a lot to criticize. It's dated, but it it's so impressive for its time, and it's just I love that it exists and that it was like preserved, that
Hmm.
it's like it's survived and is in as good of a condition as it's in, because it's like it's important. It's yeah. Joker 2 is hilarious. I'm sure that sounds like an insult because I mean most people hate that movie, but
Yeah.
it it is a very good comparison. Like there's a lot to criticize, like in pieces, but there's also so much good. And when the movie shines, it shines like insanely. So
Yeah, I mean, just that scene where the doctor tells her to kill herself so he doesn't end up becoming a murderer. Like that scene was phenomenal, and then she ends up
seriously,
shooting
I
him, and like
I was like, they got away with this,
yeah,
even some blood. It's like I know that like wasn't gonna get them
yeah, just
burnt at the
corner of the
stake, but
mouth,
like
but
I found that so funny, man. He's like literally like putting a gun to her head, trying to like suicide her. I'm like, damn, dude,
yeah, like kill yourself so I
this is
don't become a
intense
murderer.
stuff.
Like that's a fucking great line.
Yeah.
And I mean when the murderer at the end kills her too, I thought that was like super well shot too. You just see the light
Yeah,
from the candle flickering, and her grip on his arm gets looser, and then the candle goes fully out. And it's like that's such a beautiful way to show that she died. Like
yeah.
it just
Her
feels,
hand like just fading away. It's
yeah.
and his eyes too. It's like, man. because I feel bad not like maybe under discussing it. Like, it's not like
Yeah.
we could go like specific line by line, but I mean, maybe it's just better to watch it yourself than to like, hear like people talk about it, because it's like we can't quite capture what it's going to be like to watch this, but just on a basic level, it looks beautiful. Like
Yeah.
the sets and the way that shots are framed, and
Yeah, on a
especially the
filmmaking level,
performances.
it is really, really well made. The
Yeah.
I just think on like in terms of a story level, the pacing could have been done a lot better, and you could like I think that so many times like about movies or TV shows. There's a specific episode of Doctor Who that I always think like I could literally like re-edit this episode and it'd be a great episode. You just need to cut out like a scene or two, And this is kind of the way I feel about this movie. If you just edit it a little bit, it could be like a really, really, really good movie. So yeah, I don't know. It is on the verge of being like a great movie, but I would not call it a bad movie. Obviously, by today's standards, of the time, it was
Yeah.
probably like fantastic. But like in terms
Well,
of today's
that's the
standards, it's like it's not a great movie, but it's not a bad movie.
that's the other ironic thing that the opening titles mention. It was not a success at the time. Apparently, like it regained like attention in the 1950s, and that's probably one of the reasons why there's no original film negative, because like back then, like when a film failed, like it wasn't seen as important. So and just the state of film back then, like I'm sure they just had the same reels and they would have had to like copy everything. So it's so much easier to like preserve film. But again, like Blu-rays are disappearing. It's getting a little freaky how much piracy is playing into film preservation.
Yeah, I
But
was gonna say piracy
one
is probably the best way to preserve films nowadays, which is depressing.
Yeah, but it's great that this movie is like has been preserved through
Hmm.
restoration, and
I mean, yeah, it's
it's
part of
worth
the
checking out.
Criterion collection, right? You said your Blu-rays, the Criterion,
Mhm.
so
It's
it's really, really cool. This is one of those movies
it's
that I would say is definitely worth like preserving. It is such an
Yeah,
interesting like
and
it is kind of like a time capsule of like seeing the future in the past of seeing like a
well
story that feels so modern in like a time where it was definitely not that.
who knows? Like I'm not sure exactly why audiences didn't like this movie when it came out. I'd have to read into it, but I'm like, it could be just because of how different it feels, and
Hmm.
like that's probably why like it's gotten more attention, and people are like are still checking it out, even in the modern era. So it's yeah, that's probably its most fascinating trait, is just how like out of time it feels, and like
Yeah.
ahead of its time, straight up. Like it feels like the type of movie that would have been made like even 50 to 70 years after when it came out.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, as I said, it feels very 80s for me. It just has that vibe. Um, but yeah, I don't know if there's way too much more to talk about. Um, Much
Yeah.
shorter discussion than usual, but it's to be expected. And it's better, it's fine considering like the last few episodes have been like double features. This time we just chill out, just watch a one movie.
Yeah, just one silent movie and just,
Yeah.
simple stuff.
um, yeah, well,
Okay, then.
with that, it's my time to recommend something. Evan, I think you already know what I'm gonna
Come
recommend.
on. Maybe.
I think you do, because I talked to you about this movie this week, and I think I don't. Right. So,
Oh.
so it's a movie I did not like, but I think it'll be an interesting discussion because everyone seems to love it. And it's The Substance. Um, it
Bum bum
Yeah,
bum.
I did not enjoy it. Um, I mean, I think it would have been an
You
average okay movie if not for the last like 30 minutes. The last 30 minutes of the movie
I
are batshit.
I know how like balls to the wall it gets. Like I've seen some of the like stills of like the blob deal like that they have going on. Like I've heard that the movie plays into it though, that it is like absurdist and like they
Yeah.
don't take it too seriously. Like it.
Oh yeah, it doesn't take
It just
itself too seriously. I would definitely say that. There's a lot of times in the movie where it's
still.
kind of being like kind of over the top, but
What?
like in a very self-aware way. Um,
Well,
which I
what's wrong
left
with
a
the
little
third
bit of.
act? Like, what? What's
We'll
what?
talk. We'll
I
talk about
mean,
that next week, Evan. You no
fair enough. Fair
spoilers.
enough. Like I was mentioning, uh, I you have another hot take for like a similar movie that I think would be interesting to potentially bring that in because I've seen that one. I might want to rewatch it. No need to make it a double feature, but
Yeah, I
one
was
way or
gonna say it's
another.
probably better to keep away from double features for a while, because especially with Trace
Uh,
Body, you were watching it literally minutes before we started the recording. So
yeah, let's stave off of the double features for
yeah,
now, but yeah, I am fascinated to see that movie. It's pretty universal. Like that's kept attention ever since it came out, and I think people are like gunning for. There's a bunch of horror movies that have come out this year that people are like wanting to get Oscar attention. I mean, like I'm sure Nosferatu even could be a movie like that. I could see a best
oh,
director
I
or like
hope
best
so.
actress. It's we'll we'll see what the horror movie state is like this year, but a lot of people are loving some of the class of the horror movies that have been coming out.
Yeah, I guess I haven't, because like the ones that people love, I just haven't enjoyed. So, oh no, I've been the hot take person. I don't know.
How could you do this? And to movies that aren't even popular, they're like independent movies. You
Yeah,
hate
like
them. How dare you?
to be fair, I did hate Deadpool and Wolverine too, so I'm balanced. I hate popular things too. All
Oh
right.
my.
Well, the next week we're gonna talk about The Substance and see if Evan likes the movie or if he's correct. There's two options. Um, yeah. I don't know. I look. I don't think like people are stupid for liking the movie or anything. I was expecting more. That's all I'll say until next week. So yeah. Thank you very much for watching, folks. We'll see you next week. Bye bye.
See you next week. Bye bye.